Good morning. This is John Miko, and this is a lecture that I'm recording for Wednesday, October 18th. I will not be in class. We will not hold a face-to-face class. I will be in the New York, New Jersey area on Wednesday. We will meet as scheduled on Friday, October 20th. And I'm finishing up chapter 5. We're not covering all of chapter 5, but a lot of the important items from chapter 5. I do want you to do the chapter 5 quiz. That's open book, open notes. That I set a due date for this Sunday, October 22nd at midnight. And I think you have 3 attempts to do that. It's multiple choice. So that date has been set. And as you know, in Chapter 5, we're talking about database processing. And we did a lot of hands-on work because I think talking about databases theoretically is one thing, but actually developing a database is quite another. So some things that are important in this chapter, and this first part is going to be a little bit of a review. The first thing that's important is why do we need a database versus a list or a spreadsheet? And the key difference there is that a database is when we want to store data about multiple themes. And a spreadsheet or a list is when we have single themes. So in our university database where we're storing things about the example that we use about classes, hey, we need to store information about students, about courses, about classrooms, about faculty members, about offerings, and about enrollments. Those are multiple themes, therefore we need a database. And when we talk about what is a database, let's go to this slide. It says a database is tables or files which we built in Access, relationships among those rows in the tables which we built in Access. Remember, the thing that uniquely identified a row in a table was a primary key. And when we reference that primary key from another table, we called that a foreign key. So that's how we tied things together. And also metadata. And metadata is data about data. So the hierarchy of data elements is really important, okay? So a database is comprised of one or more tables. Those tables are groups of records or rows. Inside those records or rows, there are fields, columns, sometimes called attributes as well. And those fields or columns are made up of bytes or characters. And you remember, bytes are just bits. So all this comes together from the base level. Zeros and ones arranged in a certain way can become bytes. Bytes arranged in a certain ways can become characters. Characters arranged in a certain way can become fields. Fields arranged in a certain way or group of fields become records or rows. Inside tables, we have multiple records and rows. And we take those tables and we relate them together, and we have metadata that describes them. We have a database. So that's kind of the important thing. And here's an example of that primary key, foreign key. Every table has to have a primary key that uniquely identifies it. This is an example of that relationship. So this is a will miss class Friday. This is an office visit table. Will miss class Friday due to job conflict. Who is the student? Well, this is the foreign key that points to the primary key. It looks like it's Adam Verbera. This is the email table, and for homework 1, that was the student. That references this is a foreign key that points to the primary key. It's Andrea Baker. Andrea Baker must be a needy student because it looks like she emailed me again. So that is also a foreign key that points to the primary key. So the key here is that we store information one time in one place, and then we reference that information. That's what the primary key, foreign key structure looks at. So we built this in Access. As you recall, we have field names, we have data types, and this is metadata. We also did things with input mask and lookups, all those good things. Now, we want to talk about a database management system, and we kind of already saw one with Access. Database management system, the database itself is the tables, the relationships, and the metadata, but there are things that wrap around the database called a database management system allow us to do things. And the dominant database structure in the world is relational databases, and that's what Access is based on. That's what we use so far. But there's many. DB2 is one from IBM. Access is one that we saw from Microsoft, but they also have others. They have SQL Server. That's a Microsoft, more of an enterprise type of offering. Oracle offers Oracle database. That's a big one in industry. There is also MySQL or MySQL. Sometimes people say MySQL. It's open source. Remember, we talked about open source. It's free, so a lot of people use that one. But all of them are based on what we call the relational database system, where primary keys relate to foreign keys. Now, inside a database management system, there is software that allows me to do these four things. Obviously, I can read the database. I can insert records into tables. I can modify data inside a database, and I can delete data. So these are the four process operations that the database management system allows me to do against the database. Read it, insert records or columns or attributes, modify data, and delete data. The way we do that is through a language, which we saw a little bit in when we looked at Access, called SQL. SQL, very important. We say it's SQL or SQL. It is called Structured Query Language. A query, as you might know, is a question. So if we were in Germany and we wanted to ask someone a question, we would have to use the German language. If we were in Italy, same thing, we'd have to use the Italian language. Well, the way we ask a question of a database is we use SQL. SQL, and we don't, it's beyond the scope of this course to learn SQL, but SQL, I want you to know, is a way we can query databases. SQL is a way to query databases. We wrote a couple. Select these fields from this table where this condition is true. So you should know what SQL is, and many of you will be in a role where you'll be asking questions of data, of databases, and you may learn some basic SQL. If you want to learn SQL or SQL, please take MIS102, which is a database management class, and that class focuses on SQL and understanding databases a little bit more detail. We also, around a database management system, there are tools that allow us to administer the database, set up user accounts and permissions and passwords, back up the database, improve the performance of the database, remove unwanted data. So when we talk about user accounts and passwords, that's called authentication. Authentication means, what are we allowed to do? This is called authentication. And permissions is authorization. So a database management system can do authentication. You are who you say you are. And authorization, here's what you're allowed to do. I'm not going to go into that. This is also something that I wanted to talk about. And I showed this a little bit before we talked about it here. We showed it a little bit in Microsoft Access. Also, part of a database management system is to provide database application tools that make it much more useful. For example, forms. So when we looked at our data natively in the database, it just looked like a spreadsheet. But remember, we developed a form that kind of showed it to us in a form format that made it easier for us to view it and also easier for us to update it and delete it. Queries. Querying, once again, is a way to search the database tables looking for certain criteria. Reports. I don't think we ran any reports in Access, but a report is a structured presentation of data. You all know what a report looks like. It has headers, and it's sorted. So instead of a query that just returns a table, we could create a report that returns it in a much better, more user-friendly format. And we also can talk about application programs. So application programs is adding software to the front end of a database so that it is more useful. Database applications, you think about it, we talked about databases. Databases are tables, relationships, and metadata. Database management system is the system that manages it. And we can add on to that forms, reports, queries, and applications programs so that users or clients can use the data. So this is what an example of a report looks like. A lot different than a table or what a query returns. You see it has headers. Looks like we're sorting this one by email date, sorting it by student. So it's more of a presented in a way we can read it. This is what a query looks like. This is a return. Anyone that had barriers to entry in their email to us. This was the only one this query returned. So all this comes together. A database management system, and using browsers and web servers and database servers to use applications, web cloud-based applications. That's what a form looks like. We saw that in Access. This is what a report might look like. So there's some other stuff in here which the rest of this chapter focuses on database models. And, I want you to, I'm not going to test you on the exam on these concepts, and I'm not really going to go over them. I want you to read this section. This is how we structure databases. We do deal with a lot in MIS 345. It will be in the quiz, but you can use your text for that. But this is, we saw a little bit of this, student data model entities when we were in Access, how we relate things together. This is, kind of, I'm not going to go into the detail of those kinds of things, because I think that is covered for people that want more of that in database management class. I'm also not going to do the case studies. So that's all I wanted to cover to finish up chapter 5. Once again, the quiz is due Sunday at midnight. We will have class Friday. I'm sure we have a couple article presentations, and we'll start chapter 6, which is talking about networking. I hope you have a good week and enjoying your break. I'll see you real soon.